Trump is openly threatening the Insurrection Act, and the White House isn't hiding it anymore. Watch closely.
Reagan in the back.
Thanks, Caroline. I have a question for you on Minnesota and then also Venezuela.
Sure.
President Trump threatened invoking the Insurrection Act today in a Truth Social post. I'm wondering what his tipping point is. Like, what would it take for him to invoke the Insurrection Act?
Look, that's only a question, frankly, Reagan, the president can answer. But the Insurrection Act is a tool at the president's disposal. As you know, it has been used sparingly, but it has been used by previous presidents in American history. And I think the president's Truth Social post spoke very loud and clear to Democrats across this country, elected officials who are using their platforms to encourage violence against federal law enforcement officers, who are encouraging left-wing agitators to unlawfully obstruct legitimate law enforcement operations. And if you talk to any law enforcement officer, no matter what level they work at, they want to be working with their counterparts, whether that's at the federal level or the federal authorities wanting to work with their counterparts at the state and local level. And it's truly shameful that now for more than a year, you've had elected Democrat governors and mayors who have basically held their state and local law enforcement hostage and told them, you cannot cooperate with federal law enforcement. Why? They cooperated under the Biden administration. It's because these Democrats are deranged in their hatred for President Trump, and they are holding their state and local law enforcement hostage as a result. And these Democrat mayors and governors are doing this over what? Over the lawful and legitimate law enforcement operations to remove violent criminals from the streets of Minnesota, from the streets of California, from the streets of New York, and from the streets of every state across this country. And you don't see these riots and this vandalism taking place in states like Florida. Why? Because you have a governor in that state who has empowered federal and local authorities to work together. And it's despicable what we're seeing from these Democrat politicians, especially in sanctuary states and cities across the country.
Let's be very clear about what just happened, because this is one of the most alarming moments we've seen from the White House in years. From the official podium, the Trump administration openly floated the use of the Insurrection Act against U.S. states, not against foreign enemies. Not during a national collapse, against elected governors and mayors who disagree with him. That should stop you cold. The Insurrection Act is one of the most extreme emergency powers a president has. It allows the president to deploy federal forces inside the United States when states are deemed uncooperative. Historically, it's been used during moments of national crisis, civil rights emergencies, mass unrest, and genuine breakdowns of order. What we just heard was Trump's White House suggesting that disagreement with his immigration enforcement policies could justify that kind of intervention. That is not normal. That is not democratic. And it is not law and order. Listen closely to the language being used. Democratic governors are labeled deranged. Cities are described as lawless. State officials are accused of holding law enforcement hostage. This isn't about public safety. It's about delegitimizing political opponents so federal power can be justified against them. And here's the most dangerous part. The administration isn't talking about riots in the streets. They're talking about states choosing how to allocate their own law enforcement resources, something that has always been a state and local decision. Federalism isn't a loophole. It's a cornerstone of the Constitution. Yet Trump is framing cooperation as obedience and resistance as rebellion. That's an authoritarian playbook, not a democratic one. When a president starts threatening to use emergency powers against states that don't comply, that's not strength. That's coercion. And once a president crosses that line, there's no guarantee the next one won't go further. Today it's immigration. Tomorrow it could be protests, voting access, education policy, any issue where a president decides states are too defiant. That's why this moment matters far beyond Trump or this election. This is about whether we accept the idea that the federal government can strong-arm states into submission, or whether we believe disagreements should be resolved through courts, elections, and democratic processes. You don't have to support Democratic governors to recognize the danger here. If this power is normalized, it will be used again. And it won't always be used against people you disagree with. History shows us that democracy doesn't usually collapse overnight. It erodes when extraordinary powers are used casually, when emergency language becomes routine, and when leaders convince their supporters that opposition equals chaos. This isn't keeping America safe. It's testing how far power can be pushed. And if Americans don't push back now, we may not recognize the country we're left with later.